Hello, this is Wes Bridle, and this is another Kingdom Calling Economic Update video. These are short videos we've put together to follow up on the Coming Storm video we did in November, which was an hour-and-a-half presentation showing you exactly what's going to be happening in our economy so that you can prepare. If you haven't watched that video, I highly recommend you hit the link for that and go check that out for free. You'll sign up for the newsletter and you'll get that immediately sent to you in your inbox. This video, we're going to focus on hyperinflation, and if we have time, gold. I'm going to start running through those news events and just see how long it takes me. Let me first kind of summarize the idea of hyperinflation. Governments around the world, the United States, Europe, the UK, Japan, many others, are spending far more money than they're making. They've just been on a spending binge, so they have record huge high deficits, meaning they spend way more money every month and every year than they bring in, and that's building up to massive amounts of new debt. And so I think the number is, I don't have this written here, but I think in the last couple years, since 2007, the amount of debt in the OECD countries is up 7 times, which is just an amazing number. But I gave that at my presentation last week, and I think that was the stat. Just an amazing amount of debt that's going on out there. The problem with all that debt is there has to be someone that lends the money. And so as this debt builds up, there's fewer and fewer lenders to go around with all the massive borrowers that these governments are. And so we've seen our country printing lots of money. It looks like Europe is starting to join that game. And it leads to a big mess where the currencies can drastically lose a lot of value very quickly. And so we want to keep you updated on what that would look like and how you can prepare. Within the last month, China and Germany, these are two of the strongest economic countries. These are the two biggest exporters in the world, which means people send them a lot of money. These are countries that are more sound. They're not the soundest, but they're more sound on their books than we are. They had 2 failed auctions. And so they tried to sell a certain amount of debt, and not enough buyers came for that debt, not enough lenders. And so they were able to sell some, but not as much as they planned to. So they had failed auctions in 2 of the strongest countries. Now, we don't have failed auctions, and the reason for that is our auctions are rigged. The banks that participate in our auctions have to promise that they will buy all the debt that we put up on the block. But even with that, we still, because we know they might kind of jump out of the system, the Fed still buys enough of our own money, so we're taking money out of our right pocket, or we're creating it out of thin air and putting it in our left pocket. So we haven't had one fail yet, but that doesn't mean we can't. Once the world stops showing up to our auctions in a big way, that'll be a really scary thing. But these countries who are much stronger than us economically, who had auctions that aren't rigged, they failed. And so that's something to keep an eye on. Another thing that just kind of struck me recently, I keep reading it and reading it, and it finally struck me, that doesn't make any sense. Europe's idea of austerity, the Maastricht Treaty that they have, which says every country within the Euro system has to keep no more than a 3% deficit. I just thought about that. How is that austerity to only spend 3% more than you bring in? That's not austerity. That's a losing proposition. I realize the reason they think that is, the economy will grow by 3%, so it's okay. But that just makes absolutely no sense, and yet that's the idea that they're living by. Of course, none of those governments are actually doing that on a year-by-year basis, and it's a lot better than we're doing. But still, I just found that strange that that's considered austerity, to only spend 3% more than you bring in. Let's see. The Europe bailout, I think I talked about this in the Europe video, but that was a bailout of banks. What we've seen happen since then, we put a ton of US dollars in to bail out Europe, and the idea is we're sort of bailing out Europe, but really what we're doing is bailing out European banks and other banks, maybe even American banks, who have lent money in Greece and Portugal. So what you've seen since then is all of a sudden all this Greek and Portugal debt is changing hands, which means it's going from banks who owned it into the hands of the European and the United States government to clean that off the books, which means, again, as we did here 2 years ago in the United States, we're taking all this really bad paper and putting it in the U.S. government's shoulders, saying we'll take that on. Well, we're killing our books and saying we're not worth anything. Freddie Mac, again, they did another $10.6 billion bailout. If you remember, on Christmas Eve, they changed the rules, so all they have to do is ask, and they get lots of free money from us. Between Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they're up to $136.5 billion that we've bailed them out. Back to Europe, Axel Weber, who's the head of the Bundesbank, the German bank, criticized the bailout. So you can see there's massive tension. Germans understand the road they're walking down is bad because they did this in the 20s, but they're kind of being pulled along. They may end up bolting from the euro. It would probably be the smartest thing for them to do. The U.S. deficit this year, you might think things are getting better. It's exactly in line with last year's. And our trade deficit has increased to $40 billion in March. California's credit rating is now the lowest in the country, and they're paying over 7% for their 30-year bonds. If you think about this for a minute, Greece has been a massive problem for Europe. Greece is tiny. California is way bigger than Greece, and it looks like the United States is going to have to bail out California soon. Moodys came in and said the $1 trillion will not be nearly enough to bail out Greece. Well, obviously, how does lending Greece a bunch more money solve the fact that they have too much debt? It doesn't make any sense, but that's the solution that we're going with. And the next thing to think about is the United States going to be bailing out the United Kingdom soon. Again, they're about 6 times the size of Greece. That's a whole lot more devastating world economic event. But it's looking like that may be happening. They have a hung parliament there. They have trouble. Not that we don't, but we might just be the last domino to go down, the biggest, hardest fall. Morgan Stanley says the UK will lose its AAA rating in 2010. Talking about the United States economy, it's great news. The economy is growing by 3.2%, but I want you to think about it this way. The economy is growing by $400 billion a year. We've spent $3 trillion in order to engineer this up. That is not a workable system. You can't spend $3 trillion and have a $400 billion return. It's a losing proposition. That's what we've been doing. The money spending, the Keynesian ideas just don't work anymore, but we still keep trying them. And I think that's it. This is taking too long, so for the gold, I'm gonna do another one just on gold here in a minute. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, if you haven't seen the Coming Storm video, highly recommend you go and watch that for free. There's a link right by this video. Thanks, and God bless you.